With the latest set of nerfs in Helldivers 2, a lot of people are taking to the forums to be really upset about them. And this has sparked an interesting conversation around game design and game philosophy. There are a lot of people saying that a few of the enemies in the game, like the Charger, are really poorly designed enemies. So I figured, let's talk about that. And just the philosophies we have in general in the game. Now, it is important to note that I myself am not a game designer, so what do I know? Well, I can have my opinion. So this is all going to be opinions that I believe will be mostly unbiased and should be as close to accurate as we can get when we're dealing with bias and opinions. And there are three aspects that are the most important to me. Is it fun? Is it intuitive? And does it make sense? And realistically, all three of those things need to be at play for something to be good. Let's give some examples. Starfield has these giant, empty planets of nothingness. Does it make sense? Certainly. Space is mostly empty, so having giant planets with nothing on them makes sense. Todd Howard said so himself. Is it intuitive? Yeah, I think most people can figure out that a giant planet will have swaths of nothing on it. Is it fun? Absolutely not. Lots of people hated on it. So much so that the game devs had to come out and try and convince us that it's fun to walk around in an empty, vast desert of nothingness. Another good example we'll draw from World of Warcraft. In the early days of World of Warcraft, you would have these 40-man raids, which were really cool because you'd have 40 of your friends on screen overcoming a challenge all together. Does it make sense? Absolutely. These are the biggest bosses and threats the world has ever known. You need 40 people to take down these monsters. Is it fun? Yeah, it's Friday night, you've got pizza, you've got all your best pals, you're overcoming a giant boss. It's super fun. But is it intuitive? When you cram 40 people on a screen, and they're all casting AoE spells, and all of a sudden you've got all these things going around, it's near impossible to keep track of your character. This was such a huge complaint that they offered lots of different options to combat this, with add-ons, as well as options nowadays that allow you to remove spell effects from other people or customize it so that you can see certain things but not other things to make it more intuitive. And for our final example, let's talk about something that is fun and intuitive but doesn't make sense. And for this example, we're going to go over to Call of Duty, which has had a real problem with becoming like Fortnite and losing its identity. Is it intuitive? Certainly. You point the pew-pew stick at the enemy, they go down, you win. Is it fun? Well, Todd claimed to have over 100 million active subscribers at one point, so I assume with 100 million people playing it, it's fun. But does it make sense? And that's where we're starting to run into trouble, because now if you log into Call of Duty, you can have the Easter Bunny playing next to Nicki Minaj, playing next to Homelander from The Boys. And this is supposed to be a tactical, semi-serious game, or at least that's what they said at the beginning. In fact, in the most recent COD, I'm pretty sure they sold it to us saying they couldn't bring over all of our skins because they wanted to keep an air of seriousness. And that's obviously gone out the window, so it doesn't make sense, and a lot of people are leaving in droves feeling like it's just becoming like Fortnite because you have all these silly things that don't make sense in their supposedly serious military game. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into game design, game philosophy, and I could talk about them endlessly if we had hours, but I don't want this to be a 5-hour video, so let's condense it to just those three things. How do those three elements apply to the current design of Helldivers 2? I'm going to start with the Chargers because that seems to be the one that everyone is saying online that is poorly designed. So is the Charger poorly designed? Let's tear it apart. One more disclaimer, this is an opinion. Obviously, what's fun for different people will differ from person to person. What's easily intuited by one person may not be another, so this is going to be a biased opinion, but I'm going to try and set those biases aside. First off, does the Charger make sense? You have a race of alien bugs that typically don't have range, so they need to have heavy armor and speed in order to fight their foes. And in that sense, the Charger makes a lot of sense. It needs all those elements to be able to close the gap between its ranged enemies that can take them out from afar. So I think, universe lore-wise, the Charger definitely makes a lot of sense as a unit to have. Is it intuitive? And I'm going to say no. It fails on intuitive in two key areas in my opinion. Number one is its giant glowing butt. You see that and you think, oh, it's like a Hulk. If I shoot that, it's going to go down nice and quick. And that is true for certain things. But what you wouldn't know if you didn't read outside guides or read any of the forums or get help from other people is that giant fleshy exposed butt doesn't take full damage from every weapon. Lots of guns have hidden values on whether or not they dampen against that or do more damage against that. When explosive weapons were first introduced, people were asking, well, what does the explosive do? And they said, oh, well, it's for this. But you would only know that if you looked outside the game. In almost every other game you play, if there's a giant glowing spot, that is a weak point. But this isn't always a weak point, and that's where it's not exactly intuitive. Think of in The Legend of Zelda how if there's a crack in the wall, you know, oh, if I drop a bomb there, it's going to blow up and I'm going to get a secret. That's intuitive, and you don't need to go outside the game to understand it. Having hidden values in certain weapons work well against this weak spot, but other weapons don't work against this weak spot makes no sense. Point number 2 where it fails. Looking at the charger, you would imagine it's like a bowl. Once it starts to charge, you just gently walk out of the way, it'll charge past you, and then you hit that weak point. But the charger can turn pretty sharply for something that's supposed to be heavy, bulky, and not able to turn. And while it is a viable strategy if you know how to do it, it's again one of those things that's not intuitive to learn. You have to learn when to jump out of the way. You can't just run slightly to the left or right like you would imagine that would interrupt its charge. And I know I said that there were 2 things that were unintuitive, but there's actually a third one, and this is kind of wonky. And that's how his armor interacts with anti-tank. Because there's this weird momentum glitch where you have to be moving forward to do 1 more damage or else you won't strip the armor or take them down in 1 shot. Which again, the only way you would possibly know that is if you're spending way too much on the forums like I do. And then the final question is it fun? And I think the forum at least has been overwhelmingly negative, saying no, it's not. You've got an enemy that can ragdoll you, and if there's multiple chargers, which there's always multiple chargers, you can get ragdolled, chain ragdolled multiple times in a row. You've got an enemy that for low levels, they don't know how to deal with it. It seems to reflect all the bullets because they don't understand that the butt's not a weak point. And you've got inconsistencies where sometimes the rockets will take the leg off and you're able to then take down the squishy meat of the leg. Sometimes it'll one-shot the head if you hit it just right, and other times you won't. Now, I know it's tempting to say skill issue, and at some point, yes, you will learn to play around some of these things, but I think they could make it a little bit more intuitive, or at least fix a couple of these things that make it less frustrating to play against. Not even accounting for, like, the silent chargers, how somehow this thing shakes the screen when it's walking, but sometimes it can completely sneak up on you and take you on 1 shot without you even knowing what hit you. I think that there is some design improvements that could come that would make it less frustrating to deal with. I think the most obvious choice would be to make it work just like its counterpart. Let's look at the design philosophy of the Hulk. Does the Hulk make sense? Certainly it's thematic. You've got a giant hulking metal walking tank. That fits with the automatons perfect. Is it intuitive? Well, you look at this thing and its weak points are literally glowing. You've got the visor, you've got the back, and some people don't know this. Actually, the leg can be a weak point. You can blow its legs off with like the mounted heavy machine gun. It's got a flamethrower, so it's easy to figure out what it's going to do. It's going to run up to you, and it's going to shoot flames at you, which you can duck under, you can move around. And in fact, it only sweeps flames in front of it, which encourages you to run around it, which then points out its weak point on its back. Every single weapon in the game is useful against it because you can shoot those vents on the back, but even things like sniper rifles on the visor can be viable. They're a pain to deal with solo in some situations if you don't have any anti-tank, but they're not this insurmountable challenge. And the last question, are they fun? I love the Hulk. I think they're fun. You get a chance to either call in a stratagem or try and maneuver around them to get those shots on the back. You can mix it up and use laser cannons, you can use stun grenades, you can use sniper rifles, even the rail cannon works great against them. The heavy machine gun can chew them up and spit them out. But even if you bring like a regular machine gun, you can still walk around back and take them out. And so when you compare these 2 units that serve the same purpose for different enemies, you can see one is way more intuitive, way more fun to fight against, and maybe more balanced. Because the ragdolling is really a big issue. And I know overall the ragdolling is worse on the bot front, but typically the Hulks aren't the one causing the ragdolling, it's everything else. Whereas when you're fighting 3 to 5 chargers that spawned all at once, you're getting ragdolled all left and right, and now you've got the Impaler. And overall we can see even the devs have come out and said that they need to find a way to fix ragdolling. And I definitely agree with that. Again, if we look at other games as examples, one of the things that we've been taught, World of Warcraft is a great example of this, it is not fun to lose control of your character. Now, don't fully quote me on this because it's been a while since I've really seriously played World of Warcraft, but there were periods of time where you could be stunned for, I think, 13 to 15 seconds without being able to control your character at all, and people lost their minds because that is not fun. It's not fun to be playing a game and say, okay, well, I'm going to set the controller down and do nothing. Let's look at a little bit more design philosophy of a few more enemies in the game overall. Bile Titans. The devs have said that they want Bile Titans to be disruptive. When a Bile Titan pops up on the map, they want it to alter the gameplay, and they truly do that. Because when a Bile Titan comes in, it's either drop everything and take it out, or we're all panic running until we can get our stratagems back to deal with this. I think that fits in great with the universe. This is their big bad enemy. It should be disruptive to the gameplay. They have giant glowing sacks that you could easily take out to get rid of their spit attacks. That's great, that's intuitive. And when it's not bugged, which hopefully they fix eventually, you shoot a rocket into its mouth and it goes down. Perfect. Brilliant. Intuitive. I think they're a blast to play against because they do exactly what their intent is supposed to be. They disrupt the flow of the game, they make you panic, they make you drop a huge amount of arsenal weapons. Ordnance was the word I was looking for. Drop a huge amount of ordnance, or try crazy risky things like running in between its legs to get behind it to buy yourself time. Not to give them ideas, but I do wish that the Bile Titan would have some alternates, like the ability to spit like the spewers do where they turn into artillery. I would love a Bile Titan artillery. I would also love a Bile Titan that maybe doesn't spew, but it gives the earthquake effect where it like slows and knocks people over as it's walking. Shake it up a little bit. Overall, I think the Bile Titan has great design. Unlike the Hunters. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to just blindly hate on Hunters. They definitely serve a purpose. When we're dealing with an enemy that doesn't have ranged attacks, you need some way to slow the enemy down so the other guys can be effective, and they suit that role very well. It is necessary. What I don't like is how their jump works. Because sometimes they jump 5 feet, sometimes they jump 500 meters. Sometimes they jump and completely miss you. Sometimes they lock onto you like a homing rocket. Sometimes they can take you out in 1 hit, sometimes they can take you out in 5 or 6 hits. They seem very inconsistent. And inconsistency is one of those things that ruins intuitiveness and is unfun to play against. It's like in Dark Souls where there's all the telegraphed moves. If they were inconsistent and sometimes those telegraphed moves just randomly did something that they didn't seem to be intended to do, that wouldn't be fun. People wouldn't like that. And that's honestly a problem this game has had a lot of issues with, is the inconsistencies. Such as how they just fixed where the feedback on the Arc Blitzer and such was sometimes you would fire and nothing would happen. Well, it turns out that that was because your view was blocked, but you didn't have feedback for that, so you didn't know what was happening. It was inconsistent. That's unfun. Same thing with like how sometimes you can run through Bile Titan corpses, other times you can't. Sometimes if you touch them, they'll send you to the moon. Sometimes you can run through them, sometimes you're just blocked. Sometimes enemies are blocked by Bile Titan corpses, sometimes they're not. That inconsistency is very unfun. And that's what I think when I see Hunters. I don't mind that they jump, I just want to know how their jump works so that I can plan appropriately. But if it's sometimes 5 feet, sometimes 5 million feet, I have no way to plan for that. Let's jump back to the bot front, the Berserkers. These are great design. Just in the name. Okay, it's a Berserker. What's it do? It runs at you like a Berserker, and it takes a lot of damage to take down. It fits that trope to a T, and I love that. And it's very intuitive. It's going to do one thing. It's going to hunt you down. And like always, its glowing weak spots are there for you to take out. You can shoot it in the chest, you can shoot it in the face. Granted, they have a bunch of HP, so it feels like sometimes it takes a lot of shots, but those weak points do work on them. Are they fun? I know that one's debatable because some people absolutely hate them, but it forces me to switch to like my shotgun, pop an emergency stratagem. I think they add a lot of chaos to the mix and break up the monotony of just taking shots from far away. They give you a little bit more danger up close too. Great design, 10 out of 10. Love Berserkers. In fact, it's hard to think of a bot that's not well designed because they all have clear weak points that are exploitable. They all seem to fit thematically really well with the idea of robots. And I would say like 80% of the time when someone says that they don't have fun fighting the robots, it's because of the problem we already brought up, which is ragdolling, which, as again, the devs have acknowledged is a huge problem, and those rocket devastators are like 90% of the contribution to ragdolling. Now, this happened in my previous video, and it's happened to me again twice, so that's on me, but apparently the devs have come out and made a statement while I was shooting this video. And it looks like there is a rework potentially for chargers in the works. It seems like the devs, at least on some level, either agree with us that the chargers need a little bit of a rework, or their design's not quite there, or they're conceding and making the changes even if they don't agree with it because so many people are saying they're not having fun with it. So in the next 60 days, they said we should see a patch that will revamp chargers. And as we kind of already talked about, I don't think they need a huge revamp. I just think they need to turn a little bit slower or not be able to turn so sharply and make their butts an actual weak point. I don't think we need to rebuild them from the ground up. I think just 2 small changes like that will make them feel so much better. Now, we've talked about enemies a little bit. Let's talk about some overall game design, gun designs, character designs as well, since we're talking about all this. I did a whole video on negativity and why there's so much negativity around the game every time there's a nerf. And I did blame some of that on YouTube, that, you know, the more we do clickbait, the more we say negative things, the more we get clicks and people want their money. That aside, I think one of the reasons there's also so much infighting is because there are a couple different philosophies for how people want to play the game, and they aren't compatible with each other. Some people want the game to be a true horde shooter where you're feeling like there's thousands of enemies, you're overpowering them with huge weapons, you're a hero, you're beating them with just sheer firepower. And other people want the game to be like a milsim tactical. We have to be really smart about where we're going because we're underpowered, where we don't have enough reinforcements, we don't have enough tools to do the job, so we have to be really smart if we're going to conquer this planet. And both of those things can't coexist at the same time. And Arrowhead's philosophy from the start has been that a game built for everyone is a game built for no one. So they're going to have to pick a side. We can see in the game that they've created, their philosophy seems to be they want you to feel underpowered. They want you to feel overwhelmed. That's why they don't reward you for fighting. That's why you don't get experience or bonuses for fighting things, because that's not the intent. However, in the original trailers and website, it said use overpowered weapons. So it feels like they're kind of at odds with themselves. Which is it going to be? Are we using overpowered weapons, or are we being overwhelmed because we don't have powerful weapons? The weapons that have the highest pick rate seem to get nerfed rather than the weapons like the lowest pick rate getting a buff. Rather than making overpowered weapons, we're taking overpowered weapons and depowering them. Again, that's going against the philosophy they've stated, but it seems to be in line with the philosophy of what they originally wanted for the game, which is fighting doesn't reward you, don't fight. And I think it's perfectly valid for people to say that they don't find that fun. It is okay to say, I don't play games to feel weak. I want to feel overpowered. I want to defeat the overwhelming odds. I want to feel like a hero. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with a game developer saying, we don't want to make that kind of game. Look at the Dark Souls and Elden Ring, how they've said we're not going to put a difficulty slider in here because we don't want people to enjoy our game this way. There's nothing wrong with that. But when the developer has one philosophy, yet they're saying something else or trying to include other philosophies and make it work, it's creating this really, really big friction within the community that isn't fun. There's a lot of things that seem to be half implemented that need to be either fully fleshed out or removed. Stealth is great when it works, but it doesn't seem like stealth was ever really something they wanted you to do. The fact that half the time when you throw a stratagem ball or shoot at an enemy, they instantly know where you are means that you're not really using stealth in the way you would if you were playing a real stealth game. I don't have the quote offhand, but I am fairly certain at least one dev has come out and said that they don't care about stealth, they don't want you to focus on that. But some people have fun with it, and it is perfectly viable. In my last video, I did stealth all the way through and completed a mission, a level 10 super Helldive using stealth. But then they've also said that they want prone to be a big part of the game. They want people to use that prone to get those perks, to get that better, more accurate shooting, to be better with weapons. But the game heavily punishes you for going prone. Because if you sit still for even a second, a charger's going to sneak up on you, a rocket devastator's going to snipe you, or you're going to have a call-in on you within 10 seconds, so it's at odds with itself. As for the primaries, well, the devs have said they don't want you to rely on primaries, they want you to rely on stratagems, which means by their own philosophy, the primaries aren't really supposed to be all that useful. They want you to be relying on stratagems. Which is why when things like the Breaker Incinerary get too good, they want to knock that down because that goes against their philosophy of primaries can't be good. A Ruptor can't be good. But then it begs the question of, well, why are we including this? If you want this tool to feel bad, you don't want people to rely on it, well, why did you add it in the first place? Let's look at it with a different game or different terms. I'm going to go back to old reliable World of Warcraft, because I feel like most people have either played World of Warcraft or have some experience with World of Warcraft, so it's safe and reliable to talk about. Let's say they added a new weapon class altogether. Right now you have like guns and bows and crossbows. So let's say they added a new ranged weapon. And that new ranged weapon is going to be Derringer pistols. They have less range than the other guns, less damage, and don't really offer anything that the other weapons don't. People's immediate reaction is not going to be, well, thanks for adding new content for us to enjoy. They're going to ask, well, why did you add it? It's clear you don't want us to use it because everything else is better than it, so why did you even take the time to add this in the first place when you could have put that towards new stratagems, new other things? And we know Arrowhead is aware of these philosophical differences and what's fun and not fun, and that sometimes you have to make those changes. For example, we used to have that one thing where you would call in on a mission and it would have you randomly select a stratagem when you called in one stratagem. It wasn't intuitive for players. It wasn't fun for players. I don't even know if it made sense for players. So, they took it out. Same thing with the one that just made it so you had one less stratagem. They saw that fundamentally, even though that one sort of made sense, even though it was anti-aircraft and it was blocking orbitals, that didn't make sense. Like if it only blocked eagles or something like that, I could kind of see that. But at the end of the day, the most important thing was, is it fun? It's a video game. It's supposed to be fun. And it wasn't. So they removed it. So I have high hopes that they are going to make these changes. They're going to rework the Charger and people are going to love it. They're going to give us new weapons, new toys, and people are going to enjoy it. But they need to figure out what game they fully want to make and commit to it. And then they need to communicate that to the players and say, this is the game we're making, this is the vision we have. If you're not enjoying that, that is okay, but maybe you shouldn't be playing the game if you don't enjoy it, because we are not going to cater to that. Until we reach that point, we're going to continue to have this vicious cycle where every time there's a buff or a nerf, someone's going to go complain and the subreddit's going to be flooded and the Discord's going to be awful. This is a much longer video than I intended. Usually I try and stick around 10 minutes, so I'm sorry if I've yapped on for far too long, but as always, please leave a comment down below with thoughts, feelings, outrage, whatever it may be. I appreciate you watching the video for this long, and have a blessed day.